Why does a single-member LLC need an operating agreement? My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm a business law and estate planning attorney with offices in Edina, Minnesota, and New York City. And today let's take a look at one of the most common questions I get from single-member LLC owners, and that is, do I really need that operating agreement? What happens if I don't have one? So if you've read the statistics or seen the news, you'll find that there are a lot of people running single-member LLCs in the world. It's actually a great way to start a side hustle or a passion project or whatever you want to call it. The LLC is really favored because it's normally very easy to set up. The fees can be minimal, unless you're in the state of New York, and it's an easy way to protect your business from liability. So we're keeping your personal assets safe from the debts of the business. That's why it's called a limited liability company. However, when I work with single-member LLCs, meaning one person who set up the business, the one thing they often never get around to doing is their operating agreement. So they file with the state, they get their EIN, they set up their bank account, maybe they have a contract or two for what they're working on, but for whatever reason, that operating agreement is always the last thing they think of. And I get it. When you're starting out a business, spending a bunch of money on setting up the business with a lawyer seems like it's not well spent. But when it comes to something like an operating agreement, even for that individual one-person LLC, it's important that we have the operating agreement in place. So let's look at 7 reasons why your single-member LLC needs that operating agreement. Number 1, we need to clarify the ownership and structure. So it's good to have the operating agreement in place so we know who the actual member is of the business. We understand the structure of the business. It's set up as an LLC. It can show us or show a court or show a lender that we are serious about our business. We have created our operating agreement. Second reason, it's going to maintain your limited liability protection. So what happens when your single-member LLC gets sued? Almost always that plaintiff is going to make a claim that your LLC is not actually a proper LLC, that you're just using it to shield yourself from some kind of personal liability, and that we should do what's called pierce the corporate veil, meaning that your LLC protection goes away and your personal assets should be at risk as part of the lawsuit. One of the ways you can defend against this is by saying, wait a second, here's a copy of the operating agreement. You can see I put it in place right after I formed the company. It has all the different provisions that we need to deal with. It has succession provisions. It has accounting provisions. It has membership interest provisions. We have a legitimate business that was created for legitimate purposes, and I should have that liability protection for which I set up my LLC. Reason number 3, it demonstrates professionalism and credibility. So if you're going to take on lending down the road, maybe you need some money to help finance your business. It's one thing to go to them and just say, hey, I started this business, so I'm making some money. Here's my receivables. It's quite another to say, here are all of my documents. Here's my operating agreement, my initial writings, all of the documents that we do at the start of a business, whether one person or a multi-member. And it shows that your LLC is serious. It's professional. It gives it credibility when it comes to lenders and other banking institutions. And while you may not need that money now, having all these formalities in place is a great way to show that this is a serious LLC, not just a side project that you're doing without any real funding behind it. Number 4, we can avoid state's default rules. So in this case, what happens if you don't have an operating agreement is your default operating agreement is the laws of the state where you incorporated your LLC. So it probably has rules on the book about what happens for a single-member LLC, if there's any problems, if it gets sued, what the succession plan would look like, whether the interests go through probate, how lawsuits even proceed, and it may even have requirements that the operating agreement is required to give you that true LLC personal liability protection. So if you're not going to do an operating agreement, I always suggest you at least have a consultation with an attorney who does business law and sets up LLCs so that they can explain to you what that default looks like, so that you understand that if I don't do an operating agreement, here's what the default is, because you may or may not like those provisions. And if you don't like the provisions, we can create an operating agreement to make sure you opt out of them and put into place the rules that you want for your business. Number 5, it gives business continuity and succession planning. So especially in the case of a single-member LLC, and this is a question I get quite frequently, if the person who runs the business dies, what happens? Does the business go through probate? Does your spouse automatically become the owner of the business? Does somebody else step in? Well, the operating agreement can provide us with a nice framework for what happens if the owner of the LLC either becomes sick and can't run the business, or if they pass away. If we don't have an LLC operating agreement and we don't have these provisions, then the business probably goes to the probate court, and you could be looking at a long amount of time to wind it up. It can be expensive with attorneys. If it has bills to be paid, you have to get a court order to be able to pay some of those bills. So without that operating agreement, you're really leaving a lot of work to be done for your family or your loved ones. And if your idea with your business is to create a lasting legacy, a family business that can go on for generations, this operating agreement is the foundational piece. We need this in place before we can move forward with that succession planning. Number 6, we can manage potential disputes. So obviously when we have just a single-member LLC, nobody's really concerned about getting in a fight with themselves about the future of the business. However, as you hire employees, maybe you bring on a board of directors, you have other people involved, we want to make sure we have something in place to say what happens in case there are disputes. Again, this tends to be down the road thinking when you're setting up your business, but it's a pretty standard provision of your operating agreement, and it's nice to have it in place before any of these issues arise. And number 7, we have the tax flexibility. So your operating agreement will have a provision about how the LLC should be taxed, whether an S-Corp, whether a disregarded entity, if there are going to be losses that can be attributed to the LLC, if we have distributions that are going to be made to members in certain situations but not others. By having the LLC, we can have more flexibility on how taxable income and income in general is going to be treated by the LLC. So you as the owner of the LLC can have more flexibility working with your accountant on doing what's best for you, and you can use it to really minimize your tax liability. Those are the 7 reasons that a single-member LLC should have an operating agreement. You're going to clarify the ownership and structure. You're going to maintain your LLC's liability protection, demonstrate your professionalism and your credibility, avoid the state's default rules and the laws, the continuity and succession planning that it can create, managing potential disputes in the future, and then the tax flexibility we can give to the owner of the LLC. So hopefully you can see the importance of these 7 reasons for your LLC. And again, it's not necessarily required, because we look back to number 4, that if you don't do an operating agreement, your state's got one for you, but it might not say what you want it to say. So if you have more questions, you'd like to talk further, you can go to my website, andrewmayers.com. There's a red legal strategy session button on the front page. Click that and you'll be taken to my personal calendar. We can set up a 15 or 20-minute phone call to talk about your single-member LLC and creating the proper operating agreement for your business. If you like this video, you can hit the like or thumbs up button below. You can subscribe on YouTube for future episodes. And hopefully this has been helpful for you with that single-member LLC. I know nobody likes to spend money on lawyers when they don't have to, but this operating agreement can be very important for you and the future of your business.